You know, um, Usually when we talk about physical space, like an apartment or an office, there's this really ingrained expectation of objective reality.
Right, like architecture.
Exactly. You measure the walls, you calculate the square footage, you look at a floor plan, and that piece of paper tells you exactly what you have.
It's just binary, it's measurable.
Yeah, it's 500 square feet, big or small, it's on paper, and frankly, that's incredibly comforting.
Oh, absolutely. It gives us a false sense of control.
Right.
We desperately want the environments we inhabit to be static,
Yeah.
to be categorized by hard mathematical numbers, so we know exactly what we're dealing with before we even walk through the door.
But the second you step out of the realm of architecture,
And into human psychology.
yes, into the world of subjective experience and perceived spatial dynamics, that measuring tape just completely snaps.
It's useless at that point.
Totally useless. We are suddenly looking at a spatial landscape that is fluid. It mutates. It shrinks and expands based entirely on what is happening inside the space.
And, well, significantly more importantly, what's happening inside the mind of the person occupying it.
Which is an incredibly destabilizing concept if you really sit down and think about it.
It really is. I mean, it means your physical reality is defined entirely by your perception of it, rather than its actual geometry.
Your mind is the ultimate architect of your environment.
Yeah, exactly.
And that profound, honestly somewhat terrifying idea is exactly why today our mission for this deep dive is to tear apart the transcript of a seemingly simple, beautifully animated read-aloud book.
A classic.
A total classic. It's a children's text titled A Squash and a Squeeze by author Julia Donaldson and illustrated by Axel Scheffler.
And we're specifically looking at a read-aloud transcript from the YouTube channel Wizzy Whimsy.
Right. And, to really grasp the lessons hidden in this text, we're going to walk through the entire narrative step by step, from beginning to end.
We have to. Because on the surface, it's just a rhyme about farm animals in a living room.
Right. But beneath that surface, it is an absolute masterclass in behavioral psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy principles, and the neurobiology of perception.
It truly is. It's an exploration of how we actively construct our own psychological prisons.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, sometimes, those realities have to be completely, almost violently deconstructed before we can actually see the physical truth of our surroundings.
So we're going to track the physical, the emotional, and the linguistic escalation of this story to understand the actual mechanics of how a tiny space transforms into an enormous one without a single wall being moved.
Right.
And I want to anchor this right away in a feeling I know you, listening right now, have absolutely experienced.
Oh, we all have.
Think about a time you felt completely overwhelmed. Maybe it was a studio apartment that felt like the walls were actively inching closer every single day.
Or a crowded calendar where you physically couldn't catch a breath.
Yes. That suffocating feeling of being boxed in, that is exactly where our story starts. Okay, let's unpack this.
So the narrative establishes an incredibly stark, deliberate baseline of that exact feeling. We open with a little old lady living completely by herself.
And the text is meticulous about her inventory. It gives us the precise contents of her reality.
Very specific.
She lives, quote, with a table and chair and a jug on the shelf. That is the entirety of her physical space. Nothing else is mentioned.
It's basically a minimalist dream, really. But I think we need to look at the utility of those items because it sets up the psychological disconnect.
Okay, how so?
Well, a table provides utility and a surface for labor or eating. A chair provides rest.
Right.
And a jug provides hydration or maybe aesthetic pleasure. So in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, her environment is providing the absolute fundamentals for survival and comfort.
There's no excess.
Exactly. There's no clutter, no stacks of hoarded newspapers or overgrown plants mentioned anywhere.
It's just empty air and a few pieces of wood and clay. But her internal experience of this objectively sparse room is one of crushing claustrophobia.
Total panic.
Well, the text says she grumbles and grouses because there's not enough room in my house.
And she characterizes this near-empty space with a wonderfully evocative yet deeply negative phrase.
Right, she calls it a squash and a squeeze.
Yeah.
And she's so distressed that she pleads with a wise old man for help, saying, "Wise old man, won't you help me, please? My house is a squash and a squeeze."
We really have to unpack those specific verbs, though. Grumble and grouse. They are incredibly revealing.
Revealing how? They just sound like standard complaining to me.
They are. But consider the energy level required. Like, to scream or panic implies an acute crisis, right? A sudden realization of danger.
Okay, yeah.
But to grumble and grouse implies a low-level, continuous simmering resentment. It's a chronic condition.
Ah, so it's habit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She has habituated herself to the belief that the space is inadequate. Her dissatisfaction isn't a reaction to a sudden event. It's a practiced daily routine.
So she wakes up, looks at her perfectly functional table, her chair, and her jug, and she basically chooses to engage in the cognitive distortion of lack.
Yes.
I see what you're saying, but I want to offer a slightly different lens here.
Sure.
I'm hearing this inventory, table, chair, jug,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if she's suffering from a sort of spatial tunnel vision.
Spatial tunnel vision. Interesting.
Yeah, like I liken it to sitting in a massive, sprawling, echoing auditorium. But instead of looking at the vast space, you choose to sit in the very corner with your nose pressed exactly 1 inch away from a blank brick wall.
Oh, wow.
Right. Because if you only look at that brick wall right in front of your face, your entire world feels boxed in.
You lose all the context.
You completely lose the context of the vast room behind you because of where you've directed your attention. Is it possible she is so hyperfixated on the boundary of her house, the walls, that she has literally forgotten how to inhabit the empty space within it?
That analogy perfectly illustrates the concept of proprioception gone awry.
Proprioception?
Yeah, proprioception is normally our body's ability to sense its location, its movements, and actions in a physical space.
Okay.
But here, her psychological fixation on the boundary is overriding her sensory input of the empty space. She is experiencing the psychological weight of the walls, completely blind to the freedom of the floor plan.
Which makes her next move so fascinating to me. She identifies what she believes is a purely structural spatial problem. My house is a squash and a squeeze.
But she doesn't call a contractor.
Exactly. She doesn't hire an architect to knock down a wall or a real estate agent to list the property. She seeks out a wise old man.
Which is a profound subconscious admission.
It totally is. If your roof is leaking, you don't call a philosopher, you call a roofer.
Right.
By appealing to a figure of wisdom rather than a builder, she is implicitly acknowledging that the solution to her physical problem requires a shift in consciousness.
She's asking for a paradigm shift, not a building permit.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. And the wise old man recognizes that immediately. Because if he had shown up with a tape measure and tried to rationally explain to her that she had plenty of square footage, she would have rejected it.
Oh, she wouldn't have listened at all.
Her cognitive bias was way too strong. You cannot cure a chronic, habituated cognitive distortion with logic. You have to disrupt the baseline.
And he disrupts it with a plan that defies all conventional logic. She makes her plea, and he delivers his very first piece of advice. Take in your hen.
A hen.
Now, the lady isn't completely devoid of reason, right? She explicitly calls this a curious plan.
Right, she knows it's weird.
But she obeys anyway, and the moment the hen is inside, the baseline of peaceful, empty air is completely shattered. The text tells us the hen laid an egg on the fireside rug, and then it flapped around the room, knocking over the jug.
The destruction of the jug is not a minor detail.
No, it's huge.
That jug represented 1/3 of her entire identified physical inventory. It was a literal anchor of her reality.
It was. The precious jug from the shelf is gone, and her reaction is immediate. She cries out, "What shall I do? It was pokey for one, and it's tiny for two."
Okay.
Yeah, and she then adds this highly specific sensory detail. She says her nose has a tickle, and there's no room to sneeze.
No room to sneeze.
Right? She repeats her refrain. My house is a squash and a squeeze, and begs the old man for help again. Let's look at the mechanics of this disruption.
Well, the wise old man has introduced an entirely new dimension of chaos that systematically attacks her spatial awareness.
How exactly?
First, the hen claims the ground. It lays an egg on the fireside rug. That rug is no longer just a surface to walk on. It is a nesting zone.
It's an obstacle.
Exactly. It's occupied territory containing a fragile object that she now has to expend mental energy to navigate around.
She loses her thoughtless mobility. She can't just pace around and grumble anymore. She actually has to watch her step.
Yes. And then the hen claims the air. It, flapped around the room.
Vertical space.
Right. The empty air above her, which she previously took for granted, is suddenly filled with erratic motion and feathers. The static environment has become wildly unpredictable.
And it forces a linguistic shift in how she perceives her environment.
Right.
Like before, it was just a general squash and a squeeze. But now she introduces specific comparative adjectives. She says it was pokey, for one.
Which is interesting because...
He retroactively downgrades her own history. Notice that.
Yeah.
It wasn't just small before, it was pokey. And now with the hen, it is tiny. Her vocabulary is actually shrinking in tandem with her perceived space.
It is, but I think the psychology of her compliance is the most alarming part here. She recognized the plan was curious. She knew it made absolutely no sense to bring a farm animal into a space she already felt was too small, so why do it?
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly highly relatable. I think about this like a broken piece of technology.
Right?
Imagine you have an older laptop and it's running incredibly slow. It's frustrating, it's lagging, it feels like there's zero memory left. A technological squash and a squeeze, right? Sure. You call tech support and the expert tells you, hey, to fix this slow computer, I need you to download and install 3 massive, heavy, complex video editing software programs simultaneously.
Any rational person would immediately see that adding more strain to an already overloaded processor is a recipe for a total system crash.
It's completely counterintuitive. You'd say, my hard drive is full, why am I adding more weight? But sometimes you do it anyway.
Out of sheer desperation.
Exactly. You abdicate your own logic because your logic wasn't solving the problem in the first place. Think about how often you seek advice, receive a completely counterintuitive instruction, and follow it anyway.
Oh, this happens in toxic corporate environments all the time.
Really? How so?
Well, a department is completely overworked, right? And a consultant comes in and says, to solve burnout, we are going to add 3 new mandatory daily reporting meetings.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
The employees know it's absurd, but the authority figure ordered it, so they just comply.
That abdication of logic is so crucial for the wise old man's intervention to work. He is deliberately pushing her system toward a crash.
And we see the physiological manifestation of this psychological crash in her claim about the sneeze.
The tickle in her nose.
Right. She says her nose has a tickle, but she has no room to sneeze.
Which, if we think about it geometrically, is physically impossible. A sneeze is an internal biological reflex. It requires 0 extra square footage.
Exactly. But her psychological perception of the space has become so dense, so overwhelmingly tight, that she literally feels it is encroaching on her internal bodily autonomy.
Wow.
The space is no longer just surrounding her, it's actively restricting her respiration. The chaos of the flapping wings and the feathers has triggered a psychosomatic response.
The psychological walls are closing in so fast that her body is reacting as if it's being physically crushed.
Yes.
So her response to feeling crushed is, predictably, to plead for help again. And the wise old man does not back down. He actually doubles down.
He really does.
She begs for a solution, and he issues his next directive. Take in your goat.
A goat.
Again, she remarks on the absurdity. What a curious plan, but she opens the door, and the chaos instantly multiplies. The text describes the goat's immediate impact. Well, the goat chewed the curtains and trod on the egg, then sat down to nibble the table leg.
Just absolute destruction.
And the lady's reaction escalates from a question to a religious plea. She yells, "Glory be!" She assesses the new spatial math. It was tiny for 2 and it's titchy for 3.
Titchy.
And then we get this brilliant, awful detail. The hen pecks the goat and the goat's got fleas.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this phase represents a massive psychological threshold being crossed.
How so?
The chaos is no longer additive. It has become compounding. With the hen, the disruption was mostly kinetic, right? Flapping wings and knocked over jug. But the goat introduces active, purposeful destruction.
It's moving from a nuisance to a localized natural disaster.
Look at what the goat targets. You choose the curtains. Curtains serve a very specific psychological function in a home.
They're boundaries.
Yes, they represent privacy, security, the barrier between the safe interior and the unpredictable exterior. By consuming the curtains, the goat is literally eating her psychological boundaries.
Oh, wow. And then it moves on to the foundation of the room itself. It nibbles the table leg.
Right.
Going back to our initial inventory, she only had a table, a chair, and a jug. The jug is smashed. The table is now structurally compromised. Her foundational reality is being dismantled piece by piece.
And while the structural integrity of the room is failing, the social ecosystem inside the room is collapsing into violence.
The text says the goat trod on the egg.
Exactly. The delicate object created by the first intruder is casually crushed by the second. The chaos is destroying its own byproducts. And then we see active interspecies conflict. The hen pecks the goat. They're literally fighting for dominance in this confined space.
It's turning into a gladiator pit.
A gladiator pit that is now biologically hazardous.
The fleas.
The goat's got fleas. It's no longer just a matter of restricted space or property damage. The environment is now unsanitary. It is triggering the deepest parts of the human brain's threat detection system, the amygdala.
Right.
Visible threats, like a goat eating a table, are one thing. Invisible threats, like parasites, force the brain into a state of absolute hypervigilance.
I really want to pause on that state of hypervigilance because it fundamentally changes her relationship with her own home. The squash and squeeze is no longer a complaint about square footage. It has morphed into a total loss of control over her environment.
Complete loss.
When she was alone, even though she was unhappy, she had sovereignty. She could sit in her chair and look at her table and grouse in peace.
Yeah.
But now, her curtains are being eaten, her table is failing, there are fleas in her home, and a bird is attacking a mammal in her living room. How does that shift the mental state of someone who originally just wanted a slightly bigger house?
Well, it shifts them from a state of chronic dissatisfaction to acute survival-level distress.
Survival mode.
Exactly. When you lose control of your environment to this degree, your nervous system just cannot downregulate. You can't relax.
Right.
The mental bandwidth required just to exist in that space skyrockets. You are constantly calculating threats. And notice how her language reflects this shrinking bandwidth. She says it was tiny for 2, and now it is titchy for 3.
Titchy. It's such a beautifully evocative word, but it feels incredibly restrictive.
It does.
It sounds irritating, like a flea bite itself. Her vocabulary is devolving right alongside the physical integrity of the room. She is literally running out of words to describe how small her world is becoming.
Her linguistic framework is collapsing inward under the pressure. She's being squeezed out of her own ability to even articulate her suffering.
And just when you think the environment cannot sustain another ounce of pressure, the wise old man pushes the system even further.
He's relentless.
The lady, presumably dodging a pecking hen, a flea-bitten goat, and a crushed egg, begs for help again. My house is a squash and squeeze. And the wise old man, with absolute stoicism, says, take in your pig.
A pig.
She repeats her mantra of compliance, what a curious plan, and brings the pig inside. And the text describes the pig's behavior very specifically. It says, who kept chasing the hen and raiding the larder again and again.
Oh, this is a major shift.
Yeah, and the lady's emotional response upgrades from glory be to a desperate direct plea. Stop, I implore.
Implore.
This space is now teeny for 4. And then we get, honestly, the most incredible, surreal line in the entire text. Even the pig in the larder agrees my house is a squash and a squeeze.
This introduction of the pig fundamentally alters the type of energy in the room.
Wait, how is it different from the goat? The goat was already destroying the place.
Well, the goat's destruction was stationary.
Oh, true.
It sat down to nibble the table leg. It was a localized threat. The pig introduces relentless, continuous kinetic energy.
Right, motion.
The text says the pig kept chasing the hen. It implies an endless, looping predator-prey dynamic circling this tiny, ticky room.
Exactly.
The noise, the dust, the sheer visual exhaustion of a heavy animal relentlessly pursuing a flapping bird around a half-eaten table. It creates a perpetual motion machine of stress.
It's exhausting just to visualize it. But there's also a deeply primitive threat being introduced here, isn't there? The pig isn't just running, it's raiding the larder again and again.
That is the crux of it right there. The larder is the food supply. It is her sustenance.
For survival.
Exactly. The goat ate the curtains and the table structural, non-essential items, relatively speaking. The pig is going after her survival reserves.
Oh.
It's a voracious omnivore systematically emptying her caloric safety net. The threat level has escalated from a nuisance to property damage to a literal threat to her physiological survival.
And that phrasing again and again gives us a crucial marker of time. This isn't a quick 10-minute exercise. These animals are in there for a sustained period, long enough for the pig to digest and return to the larder multiple times.
Yeah.
But compounding stress of time is acting as a pressure cooker here. She is just marinating in this chaos.
And her language continues its downward trajectory. I mean, we went from pokey to tiny to titchy, and now we have arrived at teeny.
Teeny.
The walls in her psychological map are practically touching her skin. She has gone from grumbling to actively begging the universe.
Stop, I implore.
She isn't just asking for more room anymore.
No, she is pleading for a cessation of the kinetic chaos.
But, you know, the absolute best part of this section, the brilliant, deeply ironic comedic beat that Julia Donaldson throws in here, is that even the pig agrees.
Yes.
Even the pig in the larder agrees, my house is a squash and a squeeze. I mean, think about the audacity of this pig.
She's so funny.
It is the primary engine of the chaos, sprinting around, terrorizing the hen, gorgeously stuffing its face with all the lady's food.
Yeah.
And it has the nerve to look around and essentially say, you know what, The vibes are a bit cramped in here.
It's a hilarious moment of anthropomorphism, but it actually serves a deeply analytical purpose.
Really? How so?
It highlights the objective reality of the saturation point.
The situation has become so dense with matter and motion that even the agents of chaos themselves recognize that the spatial limits have been breached. When the parasite destroying the host feels claustrophobic, you know the host is in critical condition.
That's a profound way to look at it. It validates her feeling, ironically, but it doesn't solve it. It just makes the shared reality that much more absurd. And you have to wonder, when the pig agrees with her, does she feel a moment of camaraderie or just deeper despair?
Oh, I would guess despair.
Yeah, because her reality has become a shared delusion with livestock.
Exactly. Because the pig's agreement doesn't offer a solution. It only confirms her bias that the space is fundamentally flawed, setting her up for the final, most catastrophic escalation.
Which brings us to the summit of this mountain of madness.
Here we go.
She asks for help one last time. "Wise old man, won't you help me, please?" And he issues his final, devastating instruction. "Take in your cow." She obeys. And the text tells us exactly what happens. Well, the cow took one look and charged straight at the pig, then jumped on the table and tapped out a jig.
Unbelievable.
The lady's reaction is a total breakdown. She cries, "Heavens alive!" She calculates the final math. "It was teeny for 4 and it's weeny for 5. And then we get a profound shift in her physical description. "I'm tearing my hair out, I'm down on my knees." Let's break down the cow's actions because they completely shattered the laws of physics.
We really have arrived at the apex of the narrative arc here. This is the absolute maximum limit of physical impossibility and psychological endurance.
Right, because a cow jumping on a table is absurd enough, but let's remember the state of this table.
Exactly. In the beginning, it was her only piece of surface furniture. Then, the goat sat down to nibble the leg.
Right, it's structurally compromised.
So we have a compromised, unsound piece of wood in a room already packed with a frantic hen, a flea-bitten goat, a terrified pig, a crushed egg, and a weeping woman.
It's insane.
And a massive bovine charges the pig, initiating heavyweight combat, then jumps onto this precarious table and executes a delicate rhythmic dance, a jig.
It's pure surrealism. It's like a Salvador Dali painting inside a studio apartment.
The absurdity is the point, though. The wise old man has engineered a situation that completely shatters any remaining shred of conventional logic.
Because her logic wasn't working.
Exactly. The room cannot hold a dancing cow on a chewed table, yet it is happening. Her perception of reality has to break because the reality itself is impossible. And look at her final linguistic metric.
Weenie.
Weenie. It is the smallest possible descriptor she can muster. We have tracked it from squash and squeeze to pokey, tiny, titchy, teeny, and finally weenie.
She's out of words.
Her vocabulary has reached absolute zero.
Yeah, her physical posture matches this linguistic zero. I want to look closely at the physical breakdown here because it's so stark.
Yeah, let's look at it.
She started the story standing up, looking at her shelves, grumbling and grousing. It was a posture of casual, entitled dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
But where is she now? The text says, "I'm tearing my hair out. I'm down on my knees." She is physically grounded. The chaos has literally forced her to the floor. She is pulling her own hair out, which is a classic primal sign of overwhelming, unmanageable distress.
She has completely surrendered. I mean, her baseline is gone, her inventory is destroyed, her food is depleted, her air is full of feathers and fleas, and a cow is river dancing over her head. She has been broken.
Which makes me ask a really hard question.
Okay.
Has the wise old man pushed her too far? Is this intervention actually cruel? To subject someone who just wanted a bit more room to this level of psychological and physical torment? Or, I don't know, is this absolute breaking point the necessary requirement for a true paradigm shift?
That's the real question.
Did he have to completely demolish her old reality before she could accept a new one?
I would argue it is absolutely necessary.
Really? You don't think it's too much?
No, because you have to think about the concept of hedonic adaptation.
Hedonic adaptation. Remind us what that is.
Humans have an incredible ability to adapt to our circumstances, good or bad, and return to a relatively stable level of baseline happiness, or in her case, baseline dissatisfaction.
Right.
Her grumbling was a hardened habit born of hedonic adaptation. She was used to the space, so she found flaws in it. You cannot break a hardened habit with gentle advice. If the old man had just said, "Appreciate your space, look at the sunlight," she would have dismissed him. She was locked into her perspective. To rewire her neural pathways, he had to introduce a catastrophic contrast. He had to show her what a true lack of space looks like.
Okay, so the breaking point isn't cruelty.
No, it's the crucible required for her transformation.
Wow. And that crucible brings us to the release valve, the great reversal.
The unwinding.
Yes. She is on her knees, tearing her hair out, begging for help, and the wise old man finally changes his tune. He issues a new command: take them all out.
And her immediate verbal reaction to this command is the most crucial psychological insight in the entire text.
She says, but then I'll be back where I first began.
Let's stop and deeply analyze that sentence. But then I'll be back where I first began. Why is that phrasing so significant?
Because it proves her initial perception was completely flawed. At the very beginning of the story, where she first began, was her prison. It was the source of all her grousing. It was the squash and a squeeze.
Exactly.
But now, after experiencing the hen, the goat, the pig, and the dancing cow, she says, but then I'll be back where I first began, with a tone of, well, not fear, but realization.
It's a profound realization that returning to her starting point is now the ultimate goal. The very state she spent her days complaining about is now her desperate aspiration.
It's mind-blowing.
She has inadvertently confessed that her original baseline was actually perfectly fine, maybe even desirable, compared to the current reality. The wise old man has successfully inverted her value system through the contrast effect.
Let's look at how she executes this reversal, because the physical actions required to undo the chaos are so telling. She doesn't just snap her fingers and they all magically vanish. She has to actively undo the mess she invited in. The text says, she opened the window and out flew the hen. The immediate result: that's better, at last I could sneeze again. The basic biological function, the freedom of her own body, is restored instantly.
And notice the progression of the verbs she uses to remove the animals. They perfectly mirror the escalating effort required to clear her space.
Oh yes, the hen just flew out when she opened the window. Light, airy, easy. But then she shooed out the goat.
Shoo.
Right. Shoo implies vocal force, a waving of the arms. It takes deliberate effort to move a stubborn goat.
And then the pig. She shoved out the pig. We have moved from a verbal shoo to physical contact. A shove requires muscle.
Especially for a pig that's been eating all your food.
Exactly. The pig, who is happily raiding the larder, doesn't want to leave. She has to physically assert her dominance over the space to reclaim it.
And as soon as she shoves the pig out, we see the vocabulary begin to reverse escalate. She says, my house is beginning to feel pretty big.
Pretty big.
Pretty big. We haven't heard a positive spatial adjective in this entire story. The moment the kinetic energy of the pig is gone, the psychological walls start rapidly receding.
The contrast effect is in full swing here. Neurologically, her brain is flooding with dopamine and relief as the stressors are removed.
And finally, the ultimate challenge, the cow. The text says she huffed and she puffed and she pushed out the cow. Huff and puff and push.
Total exertion.
This requires total, full body exertion. She has to use every ounce of the strength she has left to remove the final massive obstacle from her life.
It is the physical manifestation of purging a toxic mindset.
And the reward for that final push is instantaneous. The moment the cow is out, she declares, just look at my house, it's enormous now. From weenie to enormous in the span of 4 physical actions.
It's incredible.
It really is incredible how quickly the human brain recalibrates to spatial reality when a massive compounding stressor is removed.
Because the physical dimensions of the house have not changed by a single millimeter since page 1.
Right.
The only thing that has changed is the comparative data her brain is using to evaluate that space.
Which brings us to the beautiful, peaceful conclusion, the aftermath of the experiment. The house is empty of animals. The lady turns to the wise old man and she says, thank you, old man, for the work you have done.
The work.
Right. She summarizes the mathematical shift she just experienced. It was weenie for 5, it's gigantic for 1, and then she completely rewrites her emotional baseline. She says, there's no need to grumble and there's no need to grouse, there's plenty of room in my house.
It's a total transformation.
And the text ends with this beautiful image of her new life. And now she's full of frolics, and fiddle today as it isn't a squash and it isn't a squeeze.
Yep.
Yes, she's full of frolics, and fiddle today as it isn't a squash or a squeeze.
You know, the irony in her statement, thank you, old man, for the work you have done, is just profound.
Why is that?
Well, what work did he actually do? Did he swing a hammer? Did he knock down a wall? Did he build an extension?
He didn't lift a finger.
He did absolutely zero physical work. What he did was act as a psychological architect. He manipulated her environment to force her to confront the absurdity of her own complaints.
Wow.
He provided a framework for extreme experiential learning. He allowed her to do the work of bringing the chaos in and then doing the physical work of shoving it back out so that she could finally appreciate the static silence.
Because, like we said, the physical dimensions of the house are scientifically identical. The table is still there, maybe a bit chewed up. The chair is there. The jug is broken.
The floor probably needs a deep clean.
Oh, definitely. If anything, her house is in worse shape than when she started. Yet, her subjective reality has totally inverted. She went from calling it pokey to calling it gigantic.
And we must contrast her new behavior with her old behavior. This is where the true transformation lies.
Right.
In the beginning, she was static. She sat and she grumbled. Her body was still, but her mind was agitated with dissatisfaction. Now, the text says she is full of frolics and fiddle-dee-dees.
I love that phrase so much. Frolics and fiddle-dee-dees. It implies dancing, joy, movement, lightness.
She has moved from embodied anxiety to embodied joy.
Which is the ultimate irony. Think about the physical mechanics of frolicking.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, by dancing around her house, she is actually taking up more physical space than she was when she was just sitting in her chair grousing. Her limbs are extended, she's moving across the floor plan. She is using more square footage now than she ever did at the beginning of the story.
Oh, that's such a great point.
But because her mind is free, because she is no longer focused on the walls closing in, she feels like she has infinite room to move.
By experiencing the extreme, crushing lack of space, she has finally learned how to inhabit the space she actually has. She had to learn how to live in her house, and the only way to teach her was to fill it so full of chaos that she literally couldn't breathe.
It's a stunning architectural and psychological journey. We've watched this little old lady go from a baseline of entitled dissatisfaction through a self-inflicted escalating gauntlet of avian, herbivorous, and omnivorous chaos, climaxing with a dancing cow on a chewed-up table.
Quite the journey.
And we've seen how the simple act of removing that chaos reset her baseline to one of immense, joyful gratitude, turning a poky little room into a gigantic sanctuary, all without moving a single physical wall.
It is a masterful story about the power of perspective, the danger of hedonic adaptation, and the sheer relief of the contrast effect.
So as we wrap up this incredibly detailed journey through A Squash and a Squeeze, we want to turn it back to you, the listener, because this isn't just a story about farm animals in a living room.
No, it's really not.
It's about how we manage the tight spaces in our own lives, whether they are physical, temporal, or emotional.
And I want to leave you with a final, perhaps slightly uncomfortable but deeply provocative thought to ponder as you go about your day.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you are currently feeling trapped in a squash and a squeeze in your own life, whether it's an impossibly overbooked calendar, a career that feels suffocating, or a relationship dynamic that feels like it's closing in on you, what is your metaphorical cow or pig?
Ooh, I love that.
What massive, chaotic, completely counterintuitive element could you temporarily invite into your situation, not to solve the problem, but just so you can experience the sheer, enormous, life-altering relief of finally pushing it back out?
Yeah.
Sometimes to appreciate the quiet, you have to deliberately invite in the noise.
What an incredible thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep challenging your own perspectives, keep checking your baselines, and we will see you next time.